This video will give you a basic introduction to strings and Python. In Python, strings are sequences of printable characters wrapped with quotes. For example, here we have the phrase "Hello Python" and it's wrapped with double quotes. This tells the interpreter that everything between the opening and closing quotes is a string. Python also allows us to use single quotes, so we can change this example to single quotes like so. But we cannot have mixed quotes where one end is a single quote and the other end is a double quote. That's not going to work. So the quotes must match. But what happens if we need to include either one of these types of quotes within a string? Well, if you only need to use one type, then of course you can use the other on the outside. So for instance, I can write this string contains quotes, or I'm using only double quotes around the word contains, and I'm using single quotes to tell Python that this is a string. However, it may be that your string contains both kinds of quotes, or for some other reason you cannot change the quote defining the string to accommodate the quotes contained by it. So in these cases, you can actually use the backslash character to escape the quotes that appear within your string. For example, if I write, "Don't forget to escape quotes," the apostrophe in the word "don't" is the same character as the outer quotes that define the string for Python. So because we've escaped it here, the Python interpreter will not interpret this as a quote that ends a string, and instead realize that this is just another character to be included in the string, and it will continue to read on until it finds an unescaped quote, like the one here at the end. Now, in general, the escape character, or the backslash here, is telling the interpreter that the next character has some special meaning and are to be handled differently. So for instance, the backslash could actually be used to add white space to string, like a tab or a new line. So if we were to create a string containing first line, period, followed by backslash n, and then second line, period, the backslash n is actually the new line character. And when printed, we'll actually insert a new line, giving us the output on two separate lines. Now, the link at the top of this section takes you to the Python documentation on text sequence types, or strings, and includes more information on everything we talked about here, as well as all the escape sequences that are available to you. Okay, so there are some instances where you don't want characters to be interpreted as escape characters in your string. For instance, if you're a Windows user, you may have some path on your system, like C:some name. And if you were to print this path, the backslash n would be considered as a new line. And this is clearly not what we want when dealing with paths on systems like Windows. So in cases like this, we don't want to interpret the backslash as the escape character. And Python supports a type of string called a raw string that does exactly that. And we can create a raw string by prefixing our string with the character R. And now you see when we print it, the backslash n is no longer considered to be a new line character because the raw string will not interpret any characters within it. It will consider everything between quotes as simply characters. Now, as an alternative to this, if you require backslashes in your strings and don't want to use a raw string, you can actually escape them with another backslash. And so if I write C://some//name, the first slash in each pair escapes the second, allowing a single backslash to appear in the output. I should also mention here that in the first example, the \s appeared in the output because it was not recognized as a valid escape sequence. And so Python simply displayed it since it didn't understand what it was supposed to be. Now, up until this point, all of our string examples have been short one-liners. But if you have a string literal that spans multiple lines, you can actually use triple quotes, as in this example here. The triple quotes can consist of either the single quote or the double quote character, and it will allow you to create strings that span multiple lines. Notice that when we run this block, all the new lines at the end of each line were preserved in the output, with the exception of the first line, which actually escaped. And so this backslash here is escaping the new line that appears on this line. Hence, we do not see a blank line as the first line of output here. Now, if a string appears as the first line after the definition of a function, this could be a single line string or a multi-line string, it will be considered as a doc string, and it will be utilized by the built-in help system. So in this example, we're defining a function toLower, and the first line of this function is a multi-line string that provides some information about what this function does and its arguments. Now, we provided no actual implementation here, but just for this example, we're going to show you how this string is automatically included in the help system. So if we run this block, we're defining the function toLower and effectively registering our doc string with the help system, so that now when I type help toLower, and run the next block, you'll see that the output includes our function name, its argument list, and then our docstring exactly as it appeared in the function definition above. To wrap up this video, I'd like to describe formatted strings. At some point, you will undoubtedly want to introduce some type of formatting to organize data in your strings. F strings are declared similar to raw strings, except they use the prefix F to denote that this is going to be a formatted string. Within an F string, we can include variables wrapped with curly braces, and when the F string is evaluated, those variables will be converted to their string representation. Let's say I have the variable val, and it has the value 9. I could print a formatted string, or an F string, by saying print prefix F. I'm going to use single quotes for my string, and then I'm going to type val equals, and this is just going to be text at this moment, and in curly braces, I'll write the variable name val. And when we run this, we get the output val equals 9. We can even use multiple instances of curly braces within a string, and they may contain variables, just as we saw in the previous example, or expressions or function calls or what have you. So we can print an F string containing 4 times, and we'll use curly braces for val, and say that equals to, and now we're going to give the expression 4 times val, again in curly braces, and then run this code block, and we see we get 4 times 9 equals 36. And this is obviously quite nice since we can generate strings with different values rather than having to hard code everything. Now, these are called formatted strings, and all I've shown you so far is that you can have your variables or expressions converted to a string representation within the F string itself. F strings actually have a special syntax that allows you to control how it displays the variables that you pass to it within curly braces. So for instance, if we wanted to zero pad our variable val and then ensure that it always contained a minimum of 4 digits, we could create our F string just as we did before. I'll say print F quote, and then in curly braces, we'll write our variable val just as we did before. But now I'm going to put colon, and then I'm going to pass a few format specifiers. And I'm going to write 04D here. The 0 indicates that we're zero padding our output. The 4 here specifies the minimum number of digits, and D specifies that we want this to be a decimal integer in base 10. And so when we ran this, we saw exactly that. The value 9 is printed in base 10 and has been zero padded so that the entire output consists of 4 digits. Now, there are a lot of options here, and we could actually change the output, say from an integer, as we have here, to a floating point value, maybe with 2 decimal places. And we can actually do that by replacing the 04D here with a 0.2f. And we see now that we get the value 9 printed as a floating point value with 2 digits after the decimal. And of course, we can go on here with many, many options, but basically these options give you control over alignment, width or spacing, and even the data type itself, as we saw here. For more details on what's supported, I've given you links to PEP 498 here, as well as a guide to F-string formatting in Python, which contain details and descriptions of what is supported, along with several examples. And I've also given you links down here to some alternative means of formatting strings. So those are also worth taking a look at.